Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzz webinar, Unpacking the Valuation Modernization, Appraisers Questions Answered, sponsored by DataMaster. We've got a great panel for you today. We're going to be talking with Jared Priestler, the Chief Appraiser at DataMaster, Brian Reynolds, who's an AQB USPAP instructor and Certified General Appraiser. He's also one of the owners at Appraiser eLearning. Jeff Bradford is the founder and CEO of Bradford Technologies, and Jeff Hamrick is an appraiser who's been appraising in the Sacramento area for over 20 years. So we're going to be talking about valuation modernization, and our guests are going to answer any questions you have. Like I said, we're going to have polls. We're going to take your Q&A. So this is going to be very interactive. So we want to encourage you to ask as many questions as you want. So Brian, let's get started with you. Let's kick this thing off. What is this valuation modernization that people are talking about?
Wow. I get to go first, huh? Well, let's just at first talk about what is modernization. And that is adapting to current needs, using up-to-date processes to improve efficiencies. I mean, that's what being modern is, modernization, right? We don't use typewriters anymore. Most people don't have landlines anymore. It's coming up to speed with what's happening in our world from a modern perspective, right? So when we talk about valuation modernization, I think that means a whole lot of things. I think that means embracing technology and using those tools. I had a class yesterday, and half of the class still uses the traditional clipboard, pad, and pen. And they have all kinds of excuses as to why they use that. And I understand, but when it comes down to it, it's a matter of change. And change is very hard. So I think modernization for our evaluation space is utilizing and adapting to the tools that are readily available to us to use, whatever that means.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Brian. So Jared, what do you see as the key opportunity areas for appraisers with valuation modernization?
I agree with Brian. I look back at my career over the past, 28 plus years, and things have constantly changed. I even remember, some of my very first USPAP classes and having all these crazy departure rules and all these kind of things that we were so constrained within these boxes of how we could do things. And I departed from the cost approach and all these different things. And I think we've seen a progression of change, in the last maybe even 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, where scope of work has changed now. And all of the changes have opened up and broadened the opportunity that we have as providers of valuation services. We no longer, look at only being able to provide a summary report or a restricted report or a self-contained report. We have much more flexibility, and as a result, we can look to a lot of different areas to expand our opportunities in our business. And I think that's one of the things that practitioners and whatever industry it is, if you look for the opportunities, maybe get a niche, certainly explore technology, how you can utilize technology, become better. What parts of the process can you diversify? What parts of the process can you get somebody else to help you with, so that you can leverage your expertise and your knowledge? All of these things, to me, that's what I think we're talking about here is how can I change with the times and still stay relevant and provide my clients with a great service that they're willing to pay me for. Bottom line, I want to get paid for my services, and if I'm still doing things the old way, then I'm not really going to be relevant in the future.
Well, thanks, Jared. I'm going to spawn our first poll for everybody. With this valuation modernization, how are appraisers feeling about this? Are you optimistic, neutral, or pessimistic? And once we get all of our responses, we'll publish that for everyone to see. Jeff Bradford, I'm going to go a little off script here. You know, being in the technology and software, you've seen a lot of these changes. How do you see the upcoming changes as compared to what you've had to deal with in the past?
So I think, and this goes back to opportunities, I think. For software vendors, I'll just give you different perspectives on opportunity here from the different points of view out there. From the software vendor point of view, the GSEs have blown up the 1004 world. And what they've done for the software vendors is given us a clean slate to create new software, right? Brand new software. And now with cloud computing, access to data, artificial intelligence, computer vision, spatial computing, all these things that are in play now, I think, for me anyway, and for my company, it's a very exciting time. Lots of opportunity to do some really good stuff. For appraisers, I think it depends on their demand or their appetite for change, right? Like Brian was saying, some people are still using pencil and paper and all that stuff, right? So producing the appraisal is going to be very different. I mean, really different. Form filling goes away. Creating the report and rearranging the pages just the way you want them to be in that report, all that goes away. But I think for appraisers, if they have that passion for solving that valuation, solving for the property value is going to take center stage. And so if they have a passion for that, they're going to thrive, right? So I think the other thing too is that, the GSEs talk about appraisal modernization. I think we're going to see the dawn of the modern appraiser. And that's quite a bit of difference there, right? And I'll just add, just as my own thinking about where we're going to be in 2 years, I think it's going to give appraisers the opportunity to reassert themselves as the gold standard in valuation. And I will tell you that with a little bit of certainty here, I think valuation is going to be faster. They're going to be specialized for that particular property. I think the report or the analysis is going to be supportable, repeatable, and I think that the claims of bias and requests for revisions, they're going to go away because the transparency is going to be there. So, in short, I think there's just a lot of opportunity for appraisers going forward. There's opportunity for software vendors, and because the way appraisals are done, will be done or be produced, it's going to open up an opportunity to go into a lot of different fields, right? It's not just going to be lending. It's going to be, the whole gamut is going to be opened up to appraisers. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
So I'm closing the poll. So it looks like the most people are neutral about what's coming up with the industry. A quarter of them are optimistic, and the rest of them are pessimistic about what's to come. So our next section that we're going to be talking about is about desktop and hybrid appraisals. So Jeff Hamrick, where does property data collection fit in with valuation modernization, and what's your personal experience with it?
Well, it's probably one of the most important things in my opinion. And my experience has been, I've been doing hybrids for close to 3 years, and I've worked for I've worked for several vendors. The primary vendor that I've worked with is Class Valuation, and so I can speak to that process. When you do a hybrid appraisal for Class, you get a virtual tour, and you can actually go inside the property. You can zoom in from floor to ceiling. You can look in. You can actually, in my opinion, because of that tour, you can see parts of the property continually that you would only been able to see when you're at the property, because you have that saved. And the way I look at it is that if the property data collection, regardless of the vendor, isn't at a level where I can be confident making evaluation or making decisions regarding the evaluation, then I won't do them. So that's, yeah, that to me, the data collection process is it's very important, and it's also one of the ways that we can leverage our time, because we're staying at the desk. So that's kind of my take on that.
So, Jared, Jeff kind of got into this. How does, in terms of income, how should appraisers be reframing their approach and mindset to make the new processes work for them, not against them?
Yeah, I appreciate kind of the introduction to that Jeff gave to this part of what we're going to talk about right now. There's a great book out that I think every appraiser should have on their desk. I don't read a lot of books. What I do is I listen to them on Audible, and so while I'm driving around, rather than listening to some talk radio or something, I like to fill my mind with positive things. But the name of the book is called The Future of the Professions. It's by Richard and Daniel Susskind, and they're out of England. And in that book, they're going to talk about the surveying profession. And in England, they call appraisers surveyors. That's their term. And so they're talking about us. Like, again, it's the future of the professions. How technology will transform the work of human experts is the full title. And one of the things that they talk about in this book, it's directly related to income. And it talks about being able to specialize. One of the things that I think about is if I was a doctor, we have a couple of doctors in our family. If I was a doctor 40 years ago and I had told you that I was only going to operate on, or I was only going to help folks that had problems with their shoulders and their hips and their knees, 50 years ago, I would have been out of business. There would not have been enough demand to keep a practice in play, a healthy practice, if I just focused on shoulders, knees, and hips. But yet today, orthopedic surgeons are one of the highest paid specialties in medicine. And I think we look at other professions and we say, what's happened to them? They have certainly modernized, and things have happened in other professions, no different than what's happening with us. And they have started to reframe their approach. They've started to look at different things. I think I can think of a handful of things right now that I'm doing today that generate income that I did not do 5 or 6 years ago. And last year, my income was actually higher than it was the year before. I didn't do as many 1004 lender reports. That work was significantly down, just like most of you that are on the call. But I figured out a way to charge for rent surveys, for short-term rental surveys, for sketch work, for all kinds of other things that I've started to specialize in. I have a handful of clients that like to buy fixer-uppers and know what it is that they need to do to those to be able to make some money. So I'm doing a lot of different work for them. What's it worth now? What's it worth when they finish it based on their plans? And what should they be doing with it? Those pay very, very well in my mind. Much better work. And so you've got to kind of look at where your services are. The other big thing that I want to talk about right here is something that struck me at a conference that I was in about a year ago in Sacramento. It was the ACT conference there, and one of the presenters, I'm not going to say who it was. If you were there at the conference, you probably will remember this comment. They made a very big point about the fact that how could an appraiser tell me what the value of a property was if they didn't know the market in which that property competed. And I wrote it down. I was so impressed with it, and I thought that's a pretty telling statement for our industry. If they're looking at our reports and they don't see our market analysis or our market work, then that's really not showing very well for us. I think the demand for a solid level B or level C market analysis is going to be critical in the future. And if you haven't had a market analysis class in a long time, you ought to go take one and refresh it, because that's where there's going to be a great demand. Things like fractional ownership. Fractional ownership is pretty common on the commercial side, not so common on the residential side. I think it's going to get there on the residential side. We're seeing a lot of folks buying properties with someone else in a fractional. Maybe they know the people, maybe they don't know them. There's a lot of services right now that are facilitating these transactions. There's just a lot of opportunity if you can get out of the mindset that I have to make X fee for a 1004 or for this particular report. Start looking at yourself as a professional and figure out how you can develop your billable hours like other professions. It's just an exciting time. And I think if you go back to that book, The Future of the Professions, Richard and Daniel Susskind, go through and look at that with an open mind and say, gosh, I can see where I need to change my business plan, or I need to look into the future of what I'm good at. And there's a lot of opportunities, but we can't keep looking back at the same opportunity we had 5 years ago and expect to get paid the same amount. It's just not there. The industry's changed. The profession's changed.
Yeah, and so it looks like I'm closing the poll for everyone, so that should pop up for everyone. It looks like 41% of the people on this webinar have completed desktop or hybrid appraisal, so they're starting to do this. So I want to be very careful how we answer this question. I'm going to go off script a little bit, but because just like you can't talk about your fees for an appraisal, they want to know, like, what is the typical fee for hybrid appraisals? So Jared, I'll let you frame that in a way that we can talk about that.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this when we were prepping, and we got to be very, very careful. I think Jeff Hamrick, sorry, Jeff, I hope I pronounced your last name right.
Yes.
I think Jeff, in his comments, really helped understand this. Some of the work that you're going to get in the hybrid and desktop arena, you're going to have less data to work with. And maybe the scope of work is a little bit less as well. And so when I'm setting mine, when I'm doing my work, I frame it more in what's my hourly, what am I worth hourly? And it doesn't really matter what work is coming in as long as I'm able to bill at that hourly rate. And so rather than saying, oh, I'm only getting whatever, 75, 125, whatever the price is for the actual report, look at it and say, what's my hourly commitment to it? What's my risk involved in that? What does the scope of work eliminate? What does it include? And really dig into it and see that, and set a professional rate. I'm not suggesting at all that we need to cheapen our services. If nothing else, my hourly rate has increased recently, and so I hope that I didn't I hope I didn't violate anything with that, but that you get the understanding, you get the sense of what you can do as far as income goes.
So this is open to everybody. What are the potential consequences of resistance to valuation modernization? As this industry is changing, what about the people that say, I'm going to just keep doing it how I was doing it?
So I'll opine on that a little bit. I think that we could say that for a lot of professions, and service providers, quite frankly. If you look at the 1 Hour Photo Lab, if that was their resistance, I'm not aware of any 1 Hour Photo Lab still around. I mean, there might be some that will still do pictures as part of their overall business model, but the days of a sole practitioner that just does the 1 Hour photo developing probably isn't around anymore. At least I'm not aware of them, right? Blockbuster Video is another example, and you've heard these stories, so I don't want to go on and on about that. But I knew a gentleman that did farm appraisal work, and he was in his 80s, and he still typed the reports. He didn't type them; he had a typist, but he still did pretty good because of his knowledge and his skill set. Right? People valued his opinion, and he worked up until the time I think he passed away. But that's a rarity, I would say. If you're still trying to type out reports and hand deliver them, you're going to certainly limit the pool of clients that are going to utilize your service. If you think back in the day when computers first came around, I mean, we were doing appraisal reports on a DOS software, right? DOS, and Windows came around, and 2000, all the stoplights and cars and nothing was going to work. Remember the Y2K scare? And that was Bradford and all of them got us to use Windows at that point, right? Because your DOS isn't going to work anymore. And then I don't know very many clients that will allow you to hand deliver a report. There's some, but if you're not going to be willing to adapt to the new technologies, you will be left behind. It's just that simple.
Well, Jeff, I know I saw on your social media you have one of the first apples ever. I think that's what it was, right?
Yes. Yes.
So obviously the difference between that and what we're all using now is vast. So what would you say about some of the resistance to change?
You know, the resistance to change is really, I think, in my opinion, predicated on what business are you in. And so some people say, you know, I'm in this business, and really they're in some other business. You know, appraisers today are really in the valuation business, and so they're not in the 1004 business. They're not in the I need to fill out this form to create this appraisal report, right? They're in the valuation business. And to Brian's point, whatever technology you need to fulfill that business service, that's what you have to do. And as technology changes, you move with the technology. You know, when we started, there wasn't an internet. There weren't laser printers, right? It was pin feed. It was all this kind of stuff. And we stayed in business because we said, we're really, and we found this very early on, we're in the publishing business, and we help appraisers publish appraisal reports. And anything that we can do to help them publish faster, easier, all those kinds of things, transmit that report, whatever, right? That's what we did. And so we've been able to stay in business because we helped appraisers publish their appraisal report. We're now moving more into, we're going to help them perform valuations. And appraisers are now going to have to move over and say, you know, I'm not going to do form filling anymore. I'm not going to mess around with the forms or the reports. All that's done for me. And now they're going to be focused on analytics, right? And it's not they don't have to be data scientists, but they have to like solving the valuation problem. And I think if they do that, then whatever tool helps them do that, whether it's a spreadsheet or Google Earth or whatever, right? They're going to thrive.
So one of our
Jim.
comments is from Glenn. He says, I'm a supporter of appraisal modernization. It's been 20 plus years for many of the forms and the data collection process. We've invested in tablet hardware, mobile form software, statistical analysis programs, and third-party measurement in preparation for the new rollouts. What else could I or any other appraiser be doing to prepare for modernization in 2024?
I think they've done a good job.
You're way ahead of the game, Glenn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that our, one thing I would just say, I agree, Glenn, your great question. And I think within that question, there's a really good message. Our observation skills need to change a little bit. I know many of you, I would bet everyone on this call, you walk into a house and you immediately know the things that you're going to be looking for. You know the sights and the smells and all those things. You have your process down in which you're the most efficient, where you can move through that property and you can observe things. You're glancing up and you're just taking it all in, and that's an observation skill. I think as you're looking at data, the observation skill needs to change a little bit. If you're like Jeff looking at a 3D dollhouse and he's walking through that dollhouse, it's a lot different to look at a property that way in that 3D scan than it is walking through it. You may see a lot more, but you're not going to inspect that the same way that you did when you were physically walking through it. So I think anything that you can do to improve your skill set in utilizing that technology, I think that those are really good things that you need to do. I think the way that we look at data, this keeps coming to my mind, and I'm just going to share it, is that we have lots of data that comes at us now. When I first started appraising, getting a little piece of data was the most important part of the process. I would knock on doors of rental properties until I had 10 or 15 neighbors or renters that would open the doors and tell me how much they were renting for. I don't do that anymore. Number one, I'd put my life at risk by doing that. But now I get all of this data, and I have to ask myself the question: what was the motivation behind that data? We have lots of MLS data. Well, what's the primary motivation of that data? Is it so that I can do analytics, or do I have to process that data in order to be able to do some analytics with it? Take out the things that were maybe more of a marketing type of comment or part of that data, and put it more into the analytics side. We need to get good at processing data. That's another skill set that I think that you could go and expand upon that would help you in the future. And right now there's not, you're not pressured and under the gun to be doing it. So now's the time to be learning those skills. That's just my mind. As I start looking through things, I'm like, where am I deficient? What do I need to become better at? And it's not, even in my communication with real estate agents, I'm not a very good texter. So what are some tools that I can use to help me communicate with them better, get the things that I need to be able to make good, solid decisions within my assignments?
I just published a poll. We had that. This is similar to what Glenn asked, and it says, are you currently using digital analytical tools for data analysis or data entry, et cetera? So be interesting to see what kind of response we get on that. Back to the Q&A. Brian, I had one for you. How do you perform hybrid appraisals in other states without having geographical competency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I struggle with this term, geographic competency. And let me just ask some of your viewers some questions. We've got folks in this webinar from all over the country, I'm sure. How many approaches to value do you have where you're sitting? I mean, where I'm sitting, there's 3: sales comparison, incoming cost. How many standards are there in USPEP? Where I'm sitting, there's 10. I think where you're sitting, there's 10. What's the 4 criteria of highest and best use? You know what? They're the same here as they are where you're sitting. The 4 agents of production, the 4 economic influences that create value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you go out and appraise a house today for a mortgage finance transaction, whether it be a purchase or refinance, you use the same form that I do. So it's not a competency issue. If you know how to appraise a house for a purchase transaction for the secondary market where you're located, you know how to do it where I'm located. So it's not a competency issue. Competency means you either know how to do something or you don't know how to do something. It is, however, a geographic issue. I will tip my hat to that. I'm not suggesting I could come to your backyard and do a good job today, or you could come to my backyard and do a good job today, but it's not because you don't know how to do it. It's not because I don't know how to do it. I know how to do it. I just don't know the nuances of your area, nor do you of mine. But if you take the amount of time to learn that area, in other words, do proper due diligence, you can achieve credible assignment results. So it's all about doing proper due diligence. We do that on the commercial side all the time. We'll go anywhere and do a commercial project. I may have to hire some local folks to help. I may need to spend a lot of time there, right? But it is possible. So I think that we need to get rid of this term geographic competency. It's really two different things. It's a matter of proper due diligence.
All right, and David, this one Jeff Hamrick, this one looks like this is for you from David. How long does it typically take to complete a hybrid appraisal?
Well, it does depend on the complexity of the actual appraisal, but in my experience, I want to say anywhere from, and this is an average, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours on average. And another really good thing about it for me is that you can do them any time of the day or morning. I mean, you don't have to make appointments. You don't have to, if you're an early riser, you can do hybrids before you go out in the field, which is that's kind of how I'm wired. But yeah, so that would be my take on that.
And I know you're living out in California. I know my family that lives out there. It takes them 2 hours just to get anywhere, and you're completing appraisals from your house.
Yeah.
This one I'm not sure who this is for, but I'll open it up. So this is from Simon. I've completed a number of modern appraisals. The GLE of these homes comes in less than public record, sometimes by more than 5%. The exterior measurements don't match those of the surveys of the homes. How do we reconcile these measurements and homes that have been measured to ANSI requirements and not confuse our homeowners?
Who was that one for?
It was open, so I don't know if there's anybody that wants to take a stab at that.
The one thing that comes to my mind as you're reading that is, if the difference is significant enough, I think you need to go back to the client and say, hey, I can't do a credible assignment. I can't produce credible assignment results under the scope of work that you've laid out with what I have. There's too much of a discrepancy. If it's 15, 25 square foot off, then maybe you have to take care of that in a commentary. But if it's significant enough that 5%, 8% is going to make a difference in your assignment results, then your scope of work either has to change. You have to go and inspect the property and measure it yourself, or you can't do that assignment. I don't know that we can produce non-credible, misleading reports, and that to me would be an issue. So if you can't reconcile it, you've got to go back to your client and kind of have that discussion.
All right, I have a question here from John on the new reports. He says the new reports from GSEs are 40 pages. I don't know about that. He says the current 1004 URAR is 6 pages. What do you think the impact on fees and turn times will be for the new forms with 6 times the reporting requirements?
Jeff, do you want to grab
yeah,
let me take that, or do you want?
So a typical appraisal report, you're right. The 1004 is 4 pages or whatever. But the entire report is usually 30 pages or more. Includes addendums and photos and everything else. The new dynamic report includes all of those things. So you're not building the report anymore. You're building the data that you aggregated and used your analysis on and all that stuff to then feed this dynamic report that kind of just builds itself. That's kind of a loose term there, but it has all the things that you would normally have in your 1004. And the nice thing about the dynamic report is that whether you're doing a condo or you're doing manufactured home or regular residence, it just kind of morphs itself into the right report. And so this is where appraisers are going to have. We're going to move their cheese, right? Because where they do the analysis and then do the form filling and create that report, that's gone. You don't create the report anymore. It builds it. You click a button and it builds itself. And so that's where it's different. And so, but the point is that you have 40 pages over here. You'll probably have 40 pages on this site as well, because all the data is there. And in fact, you may have even more data on the dynamic report.
All right. And then this question is from Pete. It says, with regards to the use of the property data collectors, why should an AMC and lender get to control the narrative? If I, as an appraiser, wish to perform PDC work directly for the benefit of other appraisers, why would I need to go through a middleman? And we actually had a poll set up about this. I'm going to get started. And we asked, would you feel more confident in the property data collection if the property data collectors were appraisers or appraiser trainees? And I know this was part of a lot of the discussion at the Valuation Modernization panel last week in DC. Brian, do you want to take?
I mean, I like his question, and I agree with his question. So we're on the same page there. I don't have that answer. Jared might be able to give some insight. I think there was a discussion that could be a real possibility where I don't know the logistics of that and the problems associated with that. But as a small business owner, I'd love to do that. I'd love to hire 5 people and train them how to do the inspection, right? And have them be property data collectors for me, or maybe even hire them out to other appraisers in my community and let them utilize that. I don't know. Would I be an AMC then? I don't know. But there was some discussion of this last week in DC. Jared, do you have any more insight on that?
Brian, I'm in the same boat as you are. I know that that was one of the suggestions that was made that came out of the roundtable discussions, and I think that there should be an opportunity for appraisers to have that that in their business model. There isn't any definite movement on it one way or the other, but it was a strong suggestion. I'm trying to remember who made it. I think it was Lewis at their table, but I don't recall more than that. But I think I would certainly, personally, I'm like Brian. I would be in favor of that, and I think my level of confidence would go up in the process. The other part, Brian, that they did talk about, well, it might have been a sidebar, was right now property data collectors can't get credit towards experience points in becoming licensed. And that was another issue, is that if the trainee wanted to go out and use that experience, because it's not part of that appraisal assignment, most states are not allowing that. There may be some states that do, but most states are not allowing that. I know the state I work in is not. And that
was a hot topic. If a trainee was going to do some of the property data collection, why couldn't they get experience credit for that? So I know that is a hot topic in the profession right now.
All right. And then Michael asked, or more of a statement, he said, we did hybrids since the 1004P days, and we stopped last year. The data collection process is extremely varied. Some are good, about 1/3 are poor quality, with the videos not matching the sketches. So Jeff Hamrick, if you want to talk a little bit to this, we talked about this earlier. You can choose who you want to do these hybrids for. You don't have to accept hybrids from everybody. Without naming names of who you don't work for or who you do, like how do you handle deciding who you're willing to do these hybrids for?
Well, part of the decision would be business decision. Without getting into fees, it would need to fit my model, what's acceptable to me, and then the second thing would be the quality of the data. Is there? Can I look at what they sent me and make and do a credible result, and if I can't, then I would decline the assignment. So that's a huge thing. Again, if I can't see the property, and then my analysis is probably not, has the potential to not be correct, and I would not accept the assignment.
All right. This is from Kathy. How difficult is it to upgrade to a UR/AR if you're uncomfortable with the data that they presented you?
We've done very few, but it hasn't been an issue. If we feel like we can't get credible assignment results, I just want to say this, I resist change just like everybody else does. I had a drive-by not long ago, and from various sources, one data source said it was a single family with an ADU. One said it was a single family, and then one source said it was a duplex. What is it? I don't know what it is. It's one of those three. And so I drove by it again, and during that time, I drove by the house 3 times. I finally found 2 different electric meters because they said duplex utilities. Well, does that mean it's a duplex, or the duplex utility just mean they have 2? I don't know. And so I called the client and I said, look, I need something. I need to expand the scope of work to either go into this property or interview the owner. And it was a pending foreclosure. So I knew they didn't want me to do that. Number 2, you need to send me an old appraisal report or something tangible I can sink my teeth in so I can get credible assignment results. Or number 3, I withdraw from the assignment. You pick. I had to have something to base my opinion on. And folks think you can use an extraordinary assumption. No, you can't. You have to have a reasonable basis for that extraordinary assumption. And I didn't have a reasonable basis that it was any one of those 3. I had no idea what it was, right? So on the drive-bys, I would rather have a property data collector report than not, as opposed to just doing a drive-by and really struggling to ascertain what's on the inside. When I can call the owner, I love doing that. I have one here locally. It has a second level. Is it finished or unfinished? I have no clue. Some of the houses over there have finished the second level. Some haven't. Is the basement finished or not? I have no idea. Luckily on that one, I called the lady. She said the second level had been finished. What about the basement? No, my husband and I never got to the basement. Could she have been lying to me? Of course. But I felt like I was getting, truthful answers. So based on my interview and the data I collected, I appraised it as if that second level was finished and that the basement was unfinished. I had a source, I had a data source that I felt was reliable. So anyway, I'm opening my mind more and more and more to this, because having something is better than having nothing at all. I feel a little bit better with those as opposed to just a drive-by.
All right. And our next question is from John T. He says, what will the future hold when we expand our regional areas when it comes to comp photos? Will we still need to be taking original comp photos?
Say that again, Jim. I want to make sure I heard what you said.
So what will the future hold when we expand our regional areas when it comes to comp photos? Will we still need original photos? So I guess he's asking, if I'm getting a hybrid, do I still have to drive out to get comp photos anyways?
Yeah, I'd like to just get rid of driving by comp photos, period, in general. Or let me send a trainee out to take my comp photos, right? Why do I have to play photographer? And in many instances, it's dangerous. I stopped on 231 to get a picture, and there's cars going everywhere. You know, it can be quite dangerous to get those comp photos. And I know there's a reason why we drive by them, not just to photograph, but to observe what's around them. But again, if we're going to modernize, if we're going to use technology on one hand, why don't we use technology on the other hand and use the technology tools to zoom in and view what's around that comparable property without me driving by that? If you put handcuffs on me as the appraiser and make me do everything, there's only so much that we can get done. We ought to be able to delegate those responsibilities, or quite frankly, remove some of those responsibilities that don't make sense anymore, like driving by and taking a comp photo.
Yeah, the scope of work on a hybrid does not include photos of the comparables, personal inspection of the comparables, right, Jeff? Jeff, you don't ever drive on your hybrid. You don't drive the comps, right?
Nope, use MLS photos.
Correct. Yeah, so the scope of work already covers that.
All right, and this next one is for Jeff Bradford from Jeff S. As a ClickForms user, will you be providing training for dynamic reporting when it comes out?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
All right, that was a softball.
We've actually started to do a preview of our new software. So yeah, we're gonna be getting there.
How does the liability of the data work? This from Kathy again. Does the appraiser have to assume all liability? If you had to drive by, is it a hybrid? So I guess just the first question, how does the liability of the data work?
You know, let me answer that in a way that we're trying to solve the problem. So we recently were doing some testing, and public records had the property as listed as something, and MLS had it different. And I was like, okay, well, what is this, right? Just like what Brian was saying. And the nice thing was that there was a sketch of the floor plan with the MLS. And so you could tell right away what it really was. And so now you have two sources, you have a floor plan, you know what it really is. Is it a duplex? Is it whatever, right? And so I think that's where having multiple sources of data coming into your system literally instantly, right? And you just have to look at this and analyze. And I don't want to use the word analyze. You just need to visually see what's going on. The system tells you, hey, there's a discrepancy here. You got to check it out. And you check it out and you make a decision and you move on. And that's how you get, reliable data points.
Okay.
There's a ton of questions in here. They're all coming in fast now. This question, the current issue with appraisal is volume and fees, and with adding waivers, etc. There's going to be a need for appraisers, but quicker ways to do the appraisal, and the need for many appraisers will reduce. So the question, this is more of a statement than a question, is are we seeing this issue that we're having just because of the volume, or is this a sign of things to come with modernization?
You know, I'll just add my 2 cents on this, but I think everybody else should chime in on this one too. Is that the GSE said we need to speed up the process, right? We need to modernize it, and so their way of doing it was to add the data collector and then have the appraiser do a hybrid, and that seems to be the path forward. My own personal feeling is that I think with technology, and this is high-end technology, that appraiser can do both. And they can do it much quicker than having somebody go out, all that QC, whatever, giving it scheduling it with an appraiser, and then finally coming out with an appraisal report. So I really think from our standpoint, software provider standpoint, is that we are in a race to help the appraiser compete with that other way of doing things. If they can do the whole thing quickly, or if they can have their own data collector working side by side with them, right? I think the whole system becomes much, much more efficient. Those are policy issues, but policy can be changed, right? And so I think that's the way it's going to be in the future, is that appraiser is we're going to arm the appraiser with a bazooka, in the story.
A bazooka. I like that.
Maybe a tank. I'm not sure.
I think long term there will be some opportunity. Listen, this has been a tough couple of years for all of us, and I'm not insulated from that. My volume is diminished somewhat, and I know appraisers that have left the profession. I know an appraiser that's taken another job. I know another appraiser's taken a part-time job. For those of us that can hang on and weather that storm, when business starts surging again, it's just a matter of supply and demand. There's fewer appraisers now. So it's been a roller, ever since I've been in this profession for 30 years, it's been a roller coaster. We've had hills and valleys, right? And this one has been unique for me, at least what I've witnessed, in that it wasn't a gradual slowdown. I mean, it was literally like the water just got turned off. You were really busy. You didn't slow down. It just kind of came to a screeching halt, and that's scary. But I am optimistic that things are going to turn. People, let's face it, people need houses. They're going to continue to buy houses. At some point, people are going to need to refinance. They're going to refinance their credit card debt, whatever the case may be. There's going to be a need for appraisers moving forward. Is our job going to look a little different in the future than it has over the past? Of course. It's naive to think otherwise. But I think that we're going to be around for a really long time, because we're trying to measure something that is simply immeasurable. We're trying to measure human behavior.
This question for Brian, I guess, to answer: which CE schools are offering classes regarding appraisal modernization or teach you how to use the analytical tools?
Yeah, so appraiser learning has a whole host of classes. One of the things that appraiser learning's been doing recently is offering some non-CE classes, and we've had great response to that. Scott Cullen, who's on my webinar in a couple of days, talks to you about how to support your adjustments. And I don't want to make this a commercial, Jim, but AEL does have a lot of non-CE training that will help get you up to speed using technology and tools to help support your opinions and conclusions.
Well, we had so many good questions, but we do want to leave some time for everybody to give us our last key takeaways before we go. So we'll do round robin. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We'll send this recording out to everybody, and you can email us at comments@appraisalbuzz.com. We can get your questions answered if we didn't get to them. We had almost 200 something questions, so we appreciate everybody's time for joining us. But let's start on the key takeaways. Jeff Hamrick, we'll start with you. What's the key takeaway about valuation modernization that you want to tell the audience?
Well, I think starting is we started talking about change and being resistant to change. I think there are some ways you can't change the way you're wired, but you can start looking at the way you look at change and try to look at it as something that's more positive. Like Brian just said, our industry is going to continue to change, and the more we resist that, the more it keeps us from using opportunities. So my biggest takeaway is that, like Jeff said, we're not 1004 producing people. We're valuation professionals. And the more we can have that as a mindset, we can diversify and we can have other streams of income. And I like that better. I like doing multiple things rather than just doing one thing. So I would say learn to accept change and then just continue to diversify.
All right. And Brian Reynolds, what's your key takeaway on this?
Man, I don't think I could say it better than the practicing appraiser, Jeff. I mean, that was excellent. We did start it out talking about change, and he circled back around to that. musicians got all up in arms when the record player came out, right? And they said this is going to be the end of live music venues and performances because people can buy records and just listen to them in their own home. And they didn't realize, hey, maybe we can figure out how this is an opportunity and we can record records and sell them, right? Most change is scary and we resist it and we just think of the bad. It's really easy to think of the negative and to complain, and it's hard to be positive and look for positive things, especially when rates have been high for a while and we're struggling, right? It's really easy to get down and bounce back up. But you have to be fluid. You have to be willing to adapt. Change is going to happen whether you want it to or not. You can resist it or you can be ready and try and adapt to change and capitalize on change. If you don't believe change is going to happen, look in the mirror. Most things change.
All right, Jeff Bradford, what's your key takeaway?
So I have 3 points here. And first, I think we need to thank the people at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae for blowing up the 1004 world. It's been painful. It is painful, but it takes the shackles off of innovation that we've desperately needed for a very, very long time. 2, if appraisers are out there hoping for a faster form filler, they're going to be very disappointed. And lastly, if you're hoping for a faster, easier way to produce a valuation and make a lot more money, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
All right, and Jared Priestler, what's your key takeaway for us?
Thank you, Jim. First of all, I want to say thank you to those that have been on the panel. What a great professional group of folks to be able to present with today. Also, as I've been watching the questions come in, there's a lot of you that have asked questions that we didn't get to, and I can feel the emotion. I can see the emotion in your questions. I don't want you to think in any way that we're diminishing the fact that this is our livelihood. This is emotional. This is the way that we feed our families. We feed the ones that we love. And I recognize that, and I appreciate your passion for the profession, and recognize that. And I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of the points. Some great points were made. Here's my takeaway. I agree with Jeff and Brian. Their points were great. I think that we need to look at ourselves and shift kind of the way that we see ourselves as modernization comes at us from a lot of different directions, from technology, from what our client, maybe one of the largest provider users of appraisal services, the GSEs, and we need to look at ourselves as providers of valuation services, not just appraisers. When we say that I'm an appraiser, it kind of puts me in a box, and I can't expand my business. But when I think of myself as a provider of valuation services, opportunities open up, like what we've talked about. I could be the owner of the business that provides the property data collection. I could be the owner of a business that helps real estate agents understand how to price properties correctly. I can be the owner of a company that provides fractional ownership analysis, that provides these different services, and that would be my big takeaway, is for you to figure out a way to monetize what you love, to see what you're really good at. If there's something that you're missing, if there's assignments that you're not taking right now, I have to tell you, in the last week, I've had 4 appraisers send me work because they were assignments that they were not comfortable doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate that work. I really do. But I see that as an opportunity for those appraisers to expand their skill set and to be able to learn. And I offer to all of them to assist them with it. Let's do this together. So next time you can service your client, you can be the one that takes that. But just expand the way that you see yourself, and continue to be passionate, be respectful and professional, but keep that passion. I really appreciate that. At Data Master, we love to participate in these. And if you haven't looked at our product lately, come and see it. There's been a lot of things that have changed. So thank you very much, Jim, Appraisal Buzz, everybody for being on with us. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for Data Master for sponsoring this. I just put a pop-up on everyone's screen. You can try Data Master for free for the next 30 days and try some of these data tools. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I think this was an enlightening hour, and we really appreciate everyone for joining us and getting to talk about what the future holds for valuation modernization. Thanks to everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.